one of these Zoom events. We are fortunate tonight to be able to share in the accomplishment of Don's full-length collection, When Danger is Past, Who Remembers, from Milk and Cake Press. It's a follow-up to his collection, Discovery. I not only have had the pleasure to hear his work and have it change my thinking of what it means to be a poet and to be a citizen of poetry, but I also had the privilege to be able to write a little bit about this collection that has just recently come out. And the way I've been able to describe it is, it's a somber scrapbook of humanity's man-made, ever-present dangers. Prose poetry, docu-poetics fuse, the personal intertwines with the political, and heralded science reveals its alternate realities, history, and the history that protects its own hypocrisy. They're very poignant, pointed poems that dissect the space race, anti-Semitism, racism, sexism, and other stark truths of Americanism. And what I'm most grateful for is that there is someone like Don Krieger willing to bear witness and share in the best way that he knows how, through his efforts at humanity, to share his work with us. Would you please welcome Don Krieger?
Yikes, Sandy. Thank you very much. It's really a privilege and a pleasure to present my work in this company. Thanks for bringing me here. Book's organized into 3 sections which form an arc. So it's a chapbook. I sort of follow Susanna Case in that, tried to make it tightly coupled throughout. First section, When Danger is Past. Nothing more human, discovery. Early refrigerants were toxic and flammable. Fatal accidents were common. General Motors' Thomas Midgley patented the Freons in '31. They were safer. 50 years later, atmospheric chemists showed that Freon leaking from 1 billion refrigerators was destroying the Earth's ozone layer. That could kill every living thing exposed to the sun. Alternate universe. We built rocket payloads for the vacuum of space, immaculate. Our test systems were just as clean, spark welded, stainless plumbing, scrubbed with solvents, blasted with dry nitrogen, then pumped down and baked red hot. I apprenticed with Jim Murphy, an old man, a widower, like I am now. He often spoke of his life in the church since her passing, stained glass window repairs, broken sewer pipes, how his watch ran backwards that time he went with another woman. Alternate universe. My handiwork, where it went. Venus is much hotter than it ought to be. Lots of carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas. And it ought to have an ozone layer, but it doesn't. Chlorine in its atmosphere, not much, but enough to destroy the ozone faster than the sun can produce it. There's a lot of Freon in the Earth's atmosphere. That has chlorine in it too. How much is too much? No one knew. But they figured if we understood Venus, It would help understand Earth. We bid for a place on Pioneer Venus with our mass spec. My part, test the inlet system. We could let only tiny bits of gas in for assay as the probe descended into the atmosphere. We also had a contract to fly a mass spec on the first 6 shuttle missions. My part, build an attached pressure gauge, tungsten wire filaments wound on a tiny mandrel, then spot welded to the pins of a feed-through. Our inlet system was stainless steel. The probe that would have carried it entered the dayside Venus atmosphere at interplanetary speed, returned signals for 60 seconds, then burned up. The inlet system that won and flew was glass. I'm sure that my gauge flew on the shuttle, though. I found a picture in a NASA flight report. It's my handiwork, where it went. 1 in 1,000 black men in America can expect to be killed by police. Edwards et al., Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, 2019. We could have been better. I drove to Goshen, one of those strange spring days. The air conditioner worked sometimes just hot air. A bad compressor leaking Freon. Someone at work asked, "Isn't that an element?" Somebody else, "You could save the money till next spring." He buys organic, biodegradable trash bags, but no clue. Maybe when danger is past, even worldwide, no one knows. And me, I worked in rocket science, then half my life with neurosurgeons, and I know that banning Freon prevented pandemic skin cancer, got it fixed right away. I woke to the governor's stay-at-home order, drove the turnpike anyway. Each cop we passed, and there were many, I thought of my white Subaru and my skin, like 1,000 times before. I thought we still used the old stuff, regulated, captured, recycled, but no, the new stuff, no chlorine, no worries. Still, it is a greenhouse gas. The old stuff was too. Maybe that's a good thing, though, a reminder. We could do better sooner, even when we don't want to. The second section, the big lie. No greater danger, no greater betrayal. There are no slaves. Anyone that sets foot here becomes free. Men and women are equal before the law. Article 19, Pinochet's Constitution. In the beginning, our fathers conceived America in war and a sweet promise. All men are equal. 11 years later, at full term, with a quill dipped in iron gall ink, they aborted their oath to the majority, to enslaved people, the indigenous, and the unmale. Even Chile's tyrant did better. Smiley Andrew, could you please mute? That's in the beginning. My dear friend, if we had sat together in a Berlin cafe on that black election day in 32, sharing our art, laughing and learning, I know you would have spoken for evil, though the beast in his brown shirts were weaker then than ours are now. Would you still have spoken so in 33 when their mad master, so like ours, triumphed? Or weeks later when their capital burned? Or the next day when their Patriot Act passed? Or the next month when their Manzanar opened? What say you now, so like then, just weeks since our president's darlings, the uncolored beasts, swarmed our Reichstag? Which of us will pick up your tab this time, and what will it be? When is the end of friendship? Will you speak for the monsters still, tender yet again, your gaslighting caress to all of us who love you? My dear friend. The third section, when danger is present. May we always remember, understand, and care enough to do better sooner. Patriot Act 3 times. The Patriot Act was signed into law on October 26, 2001, 6 weeks after 9/11. The United States invaded Iraq on March 20, 2003, 17 months later. The Department of Justice's first priority is to prevent future terrorist attacks. September 11, 2021. Colin Powell, our best and brightest, sold our self-respect, 20 billion in war work for Cheney's cronies. 300,000 fought, 400,000 of theirs. 5,000 died, 30,000 of theirs, and 100,000 innocents. We embrace 9/11's outrage, excuse for freedom surrendered. We and our tormentors bound as one in fear, delirium, and dogma. We covet our portion of hatred. We the people, may we forget. America the beautiful still cowed by 19 dead felons. Patriot Act 3 times. Lot's wife died nameless for being unmale. A young white man killed 8 last week to save himself from temptation. 7 were women: Hyun Jung Grant, Sun Cha Kim, Yang Ai Wei, Zhao Ji Tan, Sun Chung Park, Dao Yu Feng, Delana Ashley Yawn, and Paul Andre Michel. No one was there. We shopped today at the Pious Bookshop, bought Seder plates for the kids, packed in a fresh pizza box with secondhand bubble wrap. Passover is this weekend. They had coffee mugs and fridge magnets, skull caps with slogans, "We are stronger together," and "No place for hate." As if it was this morning, I remembered passing security for the funeral. The line blocks long down Darlington Road. 11 unorthodox killed at the Tree of Life. I longed for the others, the pious, to be with us together down Darlington Road and at the cemetery later, their beards, black coats, and tzitzit. But no one was there, as if you're not Orthodox, you're not a Jew, as if it matters that the murdered are. No one was there. In the beginning, Lot's wife died nameless, not because she looked back, but for remembering. In a sweet vision, I live naked, small trees wide-spaced, warm shade, rich with apricots, a white beach in view, gentle surf, a dark squall rushing across the water, a walled colossus to the south, massive piers, men of all shades at labor, oars and sails, slanted ships, long and low, bilge and shackles, Babel, the towers at city center in flames, smoke and harbor stench, billowing silver in the sun. I have always longed to live simply in an orchard, figs and cedar, olives and almonds, ladders and baskets, gloves and fresh bread, each day time stretching to the evening cool. So many remember their past lives as princes. Like them, I long for Eden, where tyranny and forgetting were new.
Is that your stopping point, Dawn? Because I noticed
Yeah.
you muted yourself.
Yeah, I had to stop. My stuff may not work for you, but it works for me.
Oh no, it works for it. It definitely works for me, and I think for many, many people. It was very moving reading. Very beautiful.
Hear, hear. You are a poetic conscience, Dawn. Very much so.
So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Dawn.
It's very beautiful. I'm gonna just unmute everyone so they can clap for a second. You know what? I'm not. I'm sorry. It's too hard. I'll share Dawn's book cover for a second. And I've been putting into the chat the link, so you can get the book at that link and learn more about Dawn on his website. Yeah.
I guess I should thank you all one more time. Thank you so much.
No, thanks to you. Thanks to you, Dawn.
Well, our next poet is Ravi Shankar, a name familiar to all of us, but one of the wonderful things about our Ravi Shankar is that he is still with us, still writing, still being an activist for poetry and for intercultural and international poetry and connections and understanding. And what I first met Ravi, I can't remember exactly when. I think it was in about 2006 or 2007, probably at an AWP conference. And we were drawn together by our common interest in and involvement in the poetry of South Asia, specifically India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, the languages of the subcontinent. I had spent 4 years in Kolkata, Calcutta, and Dhaka, Bangladesh, translating the work of Bengali women poets and writers. And Ravi, of course, as a South Asian American poet and writer, born in the US, but deeply connected both to his South Indian, South Asian roots as a Tamil Brahmin, parents born in South India and immigrants to this country. And I'm amazed, I mean, I'm admiring of the fact that he was one of the young people born in this country, but who, when his parents spoke with him in Tamil in the home, he spoke with them also in Tamil. He did not answer in English, as far as I understand, so that he has the language and is able to speak it and translate from it. And of course, Ravi's other heritage is, of course, American poetry, American poets such as Whitman and any number of others. And in fact, I wanted to say a little bit about that. His poetic diction seems to inhabit both worlds. There's a certain heightened quality to his language, which reminds me a little bit of sort of an English tone. And a lot of the poets who write in English in India or have had English medium education in India have a sort of a higher tone. But Ravi also has this other heritage, which is that of the expansive and relaxed sort of Whitman-esque heritage that we all have been familiar with. And so I remember just having really intense conversations with Ravi about, poets here in this country, about other South Indian and Indian South Asian poets and writers. And then we saw each other a couple of times. I went and read once where he was teaching at the time in Connecticut. And, some of the interesting issues of the challenges of being bicultural and bilingual, of feeling that, you belong to both cultures and at the same time, perhaps to neither culture. And some of the sadder aspects of being part of this nation is that of being racially stigmatized as a kid in school and also being racially profiled by the police. So as one reviewer said, Ravi has a complex relationship to his United States heritage and at times a sort of a fraught relationship with his South Indian heritage. But at the same time, I think ultimately his work embraces all of it. And so I'm really happy to be able to welcome Ravi here today, this evening, tomorrow, whatever time zone you're in. And one more quick thing, I want to hold up. Ravi is also one of the editors of this amazing book called Language for a New Century, which is a collection of Asian, it's poetry from the Middle East, Asia, and beyond. So this book from Norton. So there it is. And so let's welcome Ravi Shankar.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. And thank you all. What a great community. And it's my great pleasure to share this work with you. And in fact, before Carolyn came on, Dawn and I were talking about that anthology, and we have some of Carolyn's translations in there. It's really a pleasure. And I thought, since this is West East and we're kind of talking about intercultural understanding, I would start with a little translation, a very short translation of something that you might know if you've ever done yoga or read the Vedas. This is a little excerpt called the Gayatri Mantra, which is a kind of a paean to strength. You're supposed to do it in the morning with your sun salutation. And I'll just read it in Sanskrit and then my little translation. Gayatri Mantra. Om Boom Bhusvaha Tatsa Vidravarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Deo Yonaha Prachodayade. O manifest and unmanifest, wave and ray of breath, red lotus of insight, transfix us from eye to navel to throat. Under canopy of stars, spring from soil in an unbroken arc of light that we might immerse ourselves in until lit from within like the sun itself. So I'll start with that, and I think I will range around now. Of course, I'm most excited to be sharing with you that my memoir, Correctional, was just published and released worldwide this week. Oh, there's the picture. And so I've been doing a lot of readings from that. So it's really nice to kind of return to poetry. But if you're interested, tells really the story of my parents' immigration, my own interesting dealings with the criminal justice system. It's about race, mass media, mental health. And seems to be, I was just on a local Alabama NPR station, and the host said it was compulsively readable. And so if an NPR host in Alabama says that, I have fond hopes for the book indeed. Well, and actually, maybe I will read as my next poem. This is kind of loosely about the terrain in part of the book and part of the memoir. And this is from a collection called Surviving Suicide that just came out with Nirala Books. It's a pretty powerful collection. And this is a poem, speaking of the sun, called The Great Sun. And I'll just say, if I'm in Providence, Rhode Island, if you're ever here, there's a wonderful little museum, the RISD Art Museum. It's small, but has a world-class collection. And it has one of my favorite Buddhas in the world. It's a wooden Buddha. And so it emanates this kind of very warm feeling. And so you'll see this Buddha in this poem, The Great Sun, and a little epigraph from Van Gogh, the artist. And then I have nature and art and poetry. And that, if that is not enough, what
You're
is it?
connected to computer. Oops.
The Great Sun. Originally worshipped from within movable paper-thin walls of a Shingon Buddhist temple from Heian period Japan that burned down somehow in ensuing rain squalls, the sculpture made completely of wood had a lifespan more to live, for it survived and was stored on a farm before being bought by a museum, behind which I crumpled on the pavement the first time I contemplated self-harm. I'd been vilified on the evening news, was in trouble with the law, and my marriage was disintegrating. I hated myself mainly and wanted to sink into a soundless void where shame has no voice. The hurt could not be located in my body nor my mind. Instead, all I wanted to avoid grew into a forest of strangler figs filled with whispers. Everywhere I turned, gnarled branches gripped the sky in fists. I wanted to vanish. Luckily, there are two figures in this tableau. There's someone whose love can indemnify infamy, who will hold me curled as a comma in the womb of a novel bound to be pulped. She took me into triage in the emergency room, else I could have been entombed by the wish to die. Was the week I spent in treatment a mirage, or was it the blind life I thought I was living in plain sight? Locked in the chamber of a Tudor Gothic hospital, I prayed and wept, slept and delayed contacting my family. Fight or flight, and I had chosen the latter. Depressed, upbraided, scared, and on medication, I did not know where to turn. And then suddenly I remembered the Buddha, Dainshi Norya, the great sun, the generative force that can either burn or nourish. The wood of the sculpture glows warm. Its eye penetrates yours until the obsessive needs of self-narration stops. I stopped. I needed to stop. I needed to eat green jello and color and sit in a circle without judgment or expectation with people who normally I would never even have said hello to. Who cares if I were a professor? All titles and names dropped away, and I remember what it meant to breathe freely again. Listen, there's always hope. Ignore those claims otherwise. If you dig deep enough, there's love underneath trauma and a Buddha view from which being just a grain of sand in a mandala, whether yellow ochre, red sandstone, or crushed gypsum, the wind can sweep away mortal pain and scatter fear in the cosmic vastness of all that's unknown. And it's the first poem in this little collection, which is quite powerful, and I recommend. Okay, so I'll kind of lighten the mood a little, and I'll change paces. This book, The Many Uses of Mint, is a new and selected poems. It came out while I was in Australia, but of course, since now we live in the digital age, you can get it here as well. And it was really a kind of interesting exercise to go over all of your work and be duly embarrassed by quite a bit of it, and have to choose which ones that you wanted to include in a collection like this. And so I'll read you a couple from here. And maybe this first one it's a really old poem, but it talks very specifically to this feeling that Carolyn mentioned of kind of being in two cultures and not really fitting into either one. And there's a couple of words here. A lungi is what an Indian man wears tied around his waist, kind of a very comfortable kind of Indian kilt kind of thing. And epiphyte is a rootless plant, like an orchid and air plant. And this is a poem called Exile. There's nowhere else I'd rather not be than here. But here I am, nonetheless, dispossessed, though not quite, because I never owned what's been taken from me, never have belonged in and to a place, a people, a common history. Even as a child, when I was slurred in school, towel head, dot boy, camel jockey, none of the abuse was precise. Only Sikhs wear turbans, widows and young girls bindis. Not one species of camel is indigenous to India. If, as Simone Weil writes, to be rooted is the most important and least recognized need of the human soul, behold, I am an epiphyte. I conjure sustenance from thin air, and the smell of both camphor and meatloaf equally repel me. I've worn a lungi pulled between my legs, done designer drugs while subwoofers throbbed, sipped masala chai steaming from a tin cup, driven a Dodge across the Verrazano in rush hour, and always to some degree felt extraneous, like a meteorite happened upon bingo night. This alien feeling, honed in aloneness to an edge, uses me to carve an appropriate mask each morning. I'm still unsure what effect it has on my soul. And so I kind of grew up, I was born in Washington, D.C. and grew up both in Northern Virginia, then moved back when I was very young to go to school and take care of my grandmother who had gotten cancer in South India for 18 months. And so that kind of rupture in my life, I think, was really instructive in shaping me, but in also making me a poet in some ways. I'll read you one other one from here. This is a little bit of a longer poem, and it has to do, I mean, traveling is, as it is for Carolyn, and it seems like for many of you, really important, kind of understanding the world through interacting with different cultures. And I was actually had the good fortune to be visiting Nepal, and I was giving some readings in Kathmandu. And while I was there, I was contacted by an editor who asked me if I would contribute a poem to an anthology about Thomas Jefferson. I actually went to the University of Virginia, and I went to a high school that was called Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology. And so he's someone who I knew about and thought about. But it was very odd to be walking around the streets of Kathmandu, kind of thinking about one of the founding fathers. And this is where this poem kind of began. And I'll read it to you. The one small thing I'll mention, it probably won't be too obtrusive, hopefully, but this poem is in terza rima. So if you're familiar with that form, it's in tercets, and the last word of the first and third line rhyme, and then the last word of that middle line becomes the rhyme for the next first and third. So kind of a weaved, interbraided form. And this is called, and then there also is a famous quote by Thomas Jefferson where he says, honesty is the first chapter in the book of wisdom. You may know that little epigraph from Jefferson. It's referenced at the end. But there's a little different epigraph that I begin this with. It's called Thomas Jefferson in Kathmandu. And here's Jefferson. Experience has shown that even under the best forms of government, those entrusted with power have in time and by slow operations perverted it into tyranny. Thomas Jefferson in Kathmandu. Packed in Thamo into a beat up tempo, that minivan which serves as public transportation in Nepal. I'm thumbing your visage on a nickel near the tan faces of seekers and trekkers, the various people of foreign descent who throng the dusty road in saffron shirts and Rudakshamalas. The steeple up ahead really a stupa, where we stop to unload passengers and accept others. Here I think of you, TJ, in the faux Gilbert Stuart portrait that stood smelling of agar from Petri dishes, plus an old gym shoe odor that never seemed to dissipate from the halls of my high school, named for you, where I went through facial hair, trigonometry, punk rock, soccer, SATs, angst, in short, the whole gamut of adolescent failure and triumph. Now, standing in front of stalls selling Himalayan masks, frozen in poses of pent-up animal rage and wood-carved rictuses of wrath, I remember how many long hours I once had spent under your unnoticed gaze, working on some math problem or pining over the redhead I was smitten with, carrying my dog-eared copy of Sylvia Plath, dreaming myself a writer before I'd even written a single stanza worth rereading. It would be much later at the university you built where I'd be bitten by the bug properly, a sensation made ever greater in the walks I would take, traversing your serpentine walls, alone, at home in my mind, the way a crater gives shape to a surface by suggesting what's unseen, what might have once been, still what is yet to come. I trace the rim of my own unknowing, still so green, but ambitious, questioning everything, trying to shun nothing, striking together stones to make a fire that would burn brighter and deeper than a twinning sun. Here now is Chittapati, the skeletal lord of the funeral pyre, and Mahakala, the great black one, the personal tutelary of Kubla Khan, with flared nostrils, bared fangs, and ire to spare. And here you are on your plantation, Mulberry Row, where slaves worked as smiths, joiners, weavers, carpenters, and hostlers, each of whom has a story untold on unmarked graves or in your writing. Grievers mourned your death on Independence Day, but of them, what? Here I am in Alderman Library, working leverers of the elevator, moving in half floor slow as phlegm sleeping down a basin drain. Here you are in Paris, wearing yarn stockings, velveteen breeches, the exquisite hem of your waistcoat like wild honeysuckle bearing subtle blossom. Here are all the dark bodies going into ground after a lifetime of labor, and you staring from Mount Rushmore, me from under the flowing rim of the Annapurna Mountains. Here are the Bill of Rights where Sally Hemings does her light sewing. I'm on the other side of the world, and I still can't see clearly what has succeeded and what has failed in the grand American experiment. I eat my fill, no prayer bowl to beg from, yet I've been jailed and bailed out, slurred, even refused service at a diner 250 years after you were born. I know I'm not nailed to a cross, but why is it I feel so much finer and more contented in a country ruled by Maoists and Marxists than I do in the democratic designer shining city on the hill where all the Taoists, Buddhists, and Hindus I'm meeting want to move to regardless, to start new lives in the USA? How is it possible that the Nuwari dancer's ancient groove feels more timely than twerking, that I'd rather eat dosas and dal than haute cuisine? No need to prove an answer to those questions, as they're mine to read and puzzle out, but grown from a seed planted at your plantation into a towering crop I now need heed. Democracy is a fine ideal yet to be supplanted, but can it coexist with capitalism? Today I was told a Nepalese proverb, which might be loosely translated as cumin in an elephant's mouth, meaning how all the gold shines valueless next to our own nothingness, how the priceless figs we hunger for are impossible to be bought or sold. I've secreted the nickel now into the folds of the torn sari a woman with child uses to collect rupees. She is our mother from another life, and you and I are no less, no more than brothers. If even in this late hour, honesty is the first chapter in the book of wisdom, then its epilogue must be compassion, not power. Thank you. And I'll maybe just read two more to finish off, because I know we have a lot of readers tonight. I want to read, and I'm kind of enjoying reading international poems of a kind. And this is, and as you can tell, I also enjoy working in different poetic forms. And I have actually, I'm not going to share with you today, but trying to bring in some Indian forms from the Vedas. I mean, we all know about sonnets and villanelles, and of course, there's such a rich history and tradition of Asian prosody, and I'm interested in bringing that some of that over. But this is an interesting form that the British Hungarian poet George Surtses, who we were together in China, and he told me about this form. It's called a specular, and a specular, you'll hear it. So it's a poem that kind of goes forward and arrives at its midway point, and then it comes back the way that it started. And so it reverses itself from that middle point back, so that that last line is the same as the first line. So it's almost like a poem looking at the reflection of itself in a lake of some kind. And so this little specular is called The Melancholy of Shadows at Dawn. It's one I wrote. I was teaching out in China, in Guangzhou, and I was really lonely, missing my family, and I would get up every morning at 5 a.m. to kind of walk and be alone with my thoughts. And of course I wasn't. There were already people up doing their exercises, getting ready for the day. And that's kind of the context of this little poem, which is much harder than I realized it would be when I began working on it, the specular. The Melancholy of Shadows at Dawn. Along the banks of the Pearl River, where ghostly outlines of buildings materialize in the polluted smog, I could just disappear, with the old men doing Tai Chi and selling turtles in rusty buckets, hawking stringy phlegm into the river. I can barely see myself reflected, my lover, daughters, mother, plunged through me, wispy as shepherd's purse, blanched in boiling water, before filling the wanton dumplings that wrinkle like my baby girl's hands once wrapped around my fingers, grasping so tightly, and I swore I would never, ever let go. They are all that hold me to this earth. They are all that hold me to this earth, and I swore I would never, ever let go. My fingers grasping so tightly, like my baby girl's hands once wrapped around the wanton dumplings that wrinkle, blanched in boiling water before filling. Through me, wispy as shepherd's purse, my lover, daughter, mother, plunge into the river. I can barely see myself reflected in rusty buckets, hawking stringy phlegm with the old men doing Tai Chi and selling turtles in the polluted smog. I could just disappear where the ghostly outlines of buildings materialize along the banks of the Pearl River. And that form again is called a specular. And I'll just finish with one newer poem. This is not a poem that's in my selected poems, but since this is still, and I didn't think it would be, but we're still poets of the pandemic, it sounds like. And so I wrote this poem actually when the pandemic first began, and I was living in the North Shore of Boston at that time. And I opened the newspaper and I read an article about someone who passed away from COVID, and it turned out it was someone I knew who had been the grocer at the market that we used to shop at, who had exchanged pleasantries with on a number of different occasions. And this was, of course, at the very first outbreak. So I'll finish with this little poem. It's in memory of Vitalina Williams, and it's called Latin for Life. Thank you all so much for having me today. Latin for Life. A migraine so jasmine that it clings to the cortex like a floor-length drape that obscures any view from the window. Copley Square shines barren of the unmasked, and even there scant, dispersed among the traces of spring, which begin invisibly in the damp smell of earth and the tentative buds. of silver maples. Am I getting sick? Are you well? A virus inhabits the gray zone between the animate and inanimate, spreads unseen from touch, breath, the very qualities that make us human. Staying at home isn't a personal choice, it's an ethical duty, urges a retweeted headline while I eat my yogurt. It's also the purview of the privileged, those of us who can Zoom from home and still collect a paycheck. The woman who bagged my groceries, Guatemalan, is dead. I just read about her in the Boston Globe and recognized her by her half smiles, by her finger. The Vitalina Williams was her name, and she survived by a husband who could not get close enough to her in the hospital to say goodbye. He tells the reporter, nobody's to blame and everybody's to blame. She wasn't given a mask because there weren't any. The man who unloaded pallets of dairy products from the back of a tractor trailer might be getting sick, and the migrant workers who work on farms might be exposing themselves to deadly pathogens so that we can all stay safe. That's democracy now. That's the line between the haves and the have-nots. There's a metaphor here, I think, hating myself for thinking figuratively in the face of literal work. How a virus attaches to a host cell, then penetrates to replicate itself until it bursts from the membrane, killing its host. It's stunning to see under the eye of an electron microscope, aesthetically pleasing even, a haloed Helen Frankenthaler abstraction, although all I can see in mid-morning's throbbing light is Vitalina's dark eyes and her brown fingers meticulously sorting the pasta sauce into one bag and the eggs into another so that they won't break. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Ravi. That was that final poem, So the Eggs Won't Break. Wow. Such care that people give to serving others. Very moving. Thank you.
Ravi, I think the last time I heard you read was many, many years ago at Lunar Walk series, which coincidentally it was or is also co-hosted by Lynn McGee. So very small world here.
Yeah.
So Andrea Carter Brown, if you lived in New York right after 9/11, the cover of her book, this sort of dust cloud, we all had, yes, there it is on the screen. We all had that dust accumulating on our windowsills. Andrea Carter Brown lived near the Twin Towers destroyed by 9/11. And so this is her take on the aftermath. This is not so much a literal reaction to 9/11 as much as a series of poems that raise the question of how do we survive in uncertain times. This has always interested me, and I think it's a universal interest. September 12th explores this in great depth, and although it is about this specific trauma, her book uses 9/11 and also 9/12, the day after, to confront everything that is universal about trauma. I'm going to let the poems speak for themselves rather than framing them for you. So this is, by the way, I didn't know Andrea, although I knew Ravi Shanker and his work, I did not know Andrea Carter Brown before her publisher, Nancy White, sent me this book. And I think you will be as blown away by it as I was. So this is Andrea Carter Brown.
Thank you, Susanna. Can everybody hear me? I hope so. First, I want to thank the organizers everywhere, and especially these 4 organizers for doing the heavy lifting of our community, and say how honored I am to read with Don, Ravi, and Heidi. Don and Ravi, your readings were very moving, and I look forward to Heidi's work as well. As the representative of California, the west of the idea of this reading series, I wanted to open with a poem about my new life in California. It's from the last section of the book. And it serves as a love poem of sorts to my new life out here. Urban encounter in time of drought. A black snake about 2 feet long, slender as a pencil, suns itself on a quiet side street. It doesn't budge as I approach. Is it dead? The merest nudge with a stick, it sidewinds into the shrubbery. Terrified as I have been of snakes, ever since our brownie troop visited the herpetologist, who released her specimens and let them crawl freely around the room. I am sorry to chase this one away. After all, how often does one see a snake in Hollywood? It hardly rained all winter. Water restrictions in effect. Rationing is next. Wild animals come down from the tinder dry hills. As long as we can, we'll water the yard, run the fountain, feed the bird bath. Let the animals come, even the snakes. So September 12th follows, it's set in New York City, largely. It begins with a section about New York before 9/11. There's a long prose poem sequence, which is the title sequence about my experiences as someone who lived a block from the World Trade Center from the moment I fled until I returned 4 days later for the first time. And then the story continues into aftermath in all of its forms. I'm going to read I'm going to start with the beginning, the near beginning of the narrative section. And then I'm going to move in and out of that in the hope that you'll get a feeling for the various ways I try to cover this material. The North Tower is so close, I must raise the sash and stick my head out to see the top. Dark rivers of smoke pour through windows licked by flames. A thick gray tornado snout rises from the roof. That tower will fall. I couldn't be more sure. I have to flee. I run back, slam down the phone, in dirty clothes, no bra or belt. Lock up, get as far as the elevator, run back to grab my almost dead cell phone, leave for the second time. 9:03 a.m. 9/11 begins for me. Don't worry, Angel says. Everything will be okay. It's a doorman's job to reassure. But I know he is wrong. How could two such tall buildings on fire within not come down? For now, standing outside the building lobby in the courtyard, I can see both towers, can see thick black smoke, orange and red flames, can hear explosions, the steel groaning as it softens and sways, the crackle glass makes shattering. A man hurls an office chair repeatedly against a window on a high floor. At another, glass already gone, two women perch side by side on the narrow sill. Hold hands, pause a moment, jump. It will be a year before I realize the sounds I hear in dreams are people screaming. In the months after 9/11, I learned that 11 people from the small suburban town where I grew up, about 10 miles northwest of New York City, 11 people had died that morning. It was a town that funneled its workers to Wall Street because that's where the commuter trains went. And that loss spoke to me personally. And so there's a whole section of the book about that town and those 11 people. I'm going to read one poem from that section. It's an homage to Whitman, and it's titled The Rock in the Glen. Picture a pretty town, peaceful, stately trees lining its streets, children walking to school weekday mornings. Picture cars, bikes, and pedestrians converging on the two train stations at the same time, the hurried goodbyes. Picture a quietness after the commuters leave. The pretty town like Sleeping Beauty, waiting to be kissed awake when they return. Picture the spill of play, parties, and gossip across yards without hedges or fences. Picture a breeze rustling the oaks and maples, spreading the news the morning of September 11th. Picture a pretty town brought to its knees. So I'm going to move back to the narrative sequence. After the section I read, the poem follows what I call my adventure from the time I fled until 12 hours later. I was reunited with my husband in Westchester. It was about a 100-mile trip. And this section is about the first time we returned to our apartment. 4 days later, Saturday, September 15th, Tom and I go home for the first time under National Guard escort. Flashlights on, dust mask positioned over nose and mouth. We walk through the lobby, up 5 flights of stairs, and down dark hallways reeking of spoiled food. Inside the apartment, dirty white dust covers everything. The dust contains ashes of the thousands who vanished 4 mornings ago. We know this without being told. The dead now lie in our home, now cover every surface. They coat silverware, the runners on which drawers open and close. They sleep in book bindings. They seep between pages, and underneath volumes packed tight on shelves, they find corners of closets where we haven't looked in years. Yes, the dead are with us, will always be with us. Our home has become their final resting place. We hesitate to disturb them. Leave them in peace, if there can be any. As for the living, I long to simply walk away, take nothing, and never come back. I'm going to read 2 poems from the aftermath section. Both of them are concrete poems. The first is what I've always called an exploded sonnet. It consists of 14 very short lines arranged so that there is a gash down the middle. These lines are fragments, and they are all that I could write for at least 6 months after 9/11. I was envious of artists who could immediately put voice or anything else to service the sense of loss we felt. Me, I was completely silent. And so this poem is called After the Disaster, Fragments. We are not starving. We are wearing shoes on our feet. We have friends to care for us, a roof, albeit borrowed, over our heads. We are husbands, wives still, lovers, parents, children. But the dust of thousands has settled over our living rooms, an early snowfall in late summer, the first winter of the rest of our lives. And the other concrete poem, let me find it. Is in 2 skinny, slender columns. All of us have memories of or associations with the Twin Towers. These are mine as someone who lived there. Pinstriped bullies. Some of us hated you. So tall, too skinny to be true. You swayed in wind-paired pendulums, making us seasick. Alternating vertical stripes, white, black, hurt your eyes, marble. Dark glass echoed whatever weather was moving through. We gazed up, necks aching. You ended at sky until you collapsed in a cloud that rivered the blue before falling into the ocean. To live in your shadow was to feel infinitesimal. And I'm gonna return to the concluding section of the title poem. Seated on a park bench in Westchester at dusk, September 12th, the night after the disaster, you asked to hear the story of how you came back to me. It's my new favorite story. Quietly, my voice almost a whisper. I tell you once again everything I can remember, filling in the blanks that have come back to me since the last time I told you, that come back to me now as I speak. Just the two of us in the world, only the two of us in this world. In the world of this story, there are two of us still living, and 10,000, we thought then, vanished in the rubble that burns near our home. How do we live with that knowledge? Night falls as we look out over the harbor, listening to the slap of water on sand and prow, the creak of rigging in cleats. We are washed up on this improbable suburban shore, alive, but beached completely at sea in this new world, this next life for which we have been spared, if unprepared. Mamaroneck enfolds us like a dream. A solitary night heron brays like a hound, patrolling the nearby shoreline. We rest, exhausted in its spell. Too soon, it will be time to leave. And I'm going to close with two short poems. One of them steps out of the perspective of the experience and the story and looks far, far into the future, to the dust in our eyes, in the corner of a pocket, under a bed, on top of books, behind them, along a windowsill, trapped by screens, glass suspended in the air. It sticks to needles and leaves, to branches, bark, shrubs, mulch, to soil. On puddles, it floats, in gutters, down streams to rivers flowing into the ocean, until currents, slowing, can carry the load no longer. It drifts to the bottom of the sea, waits as mud. Sediments compress, solidify, a record in stone, a world as once it was. And for my last poem, I'm going to return to California, to the life after 9/11. It too is a love poem. Domestic karma. Pair of pulleys, a circle of rope stretched taut into parallel lines, dividing the driveway, lime tree from lemon and tangerine, small square wicker basket, wooden clothespins, the week's worth of suspended shirts, tickles aloe, hens and chicks, pillowcases, damp sheets, release memories of rumpled sleep and bad dreams to the breeze. Clean underwear, made fresh for the body you love to undress. Socks newly plumped, cushioned steps. Monday morning again. May this ritual help us get through the week between tests and results. May it bring months of Mondays like this. Shirts loving, sun on shoulders. Fear faded as favorite blue jeans pinned to the line. Socks ready to take us wherever we want. Thank you.
Andrea Carter Brown. Andrea, I have no words that sufficiently follow your stunning reading from your collection, but I'm sure your poems will stay with us for a long time. Thank you so much for agreeing to read for us.
Thank you, Susanna.
I feel similarly to what Susanna said. I was thinking about how a calendar can enumerate a day, but it can't really encapsulate the genuine rupture, like, of time that happens on a day like September 11th. It also made me think of a lot of the narratives that I've read of Titanic survivors, which is something I've studied, and that same kind of rupture. It's far vaster than the sense of before and after. And I'm speechless, and I'm grateful for your book, and you're sharing that work tonight with us. I think it's a really interesting transition to Heidi Seaborn's work, and I'm hearkening back right to the last poem that Andrea read, with those lines of rumpled sheets and bad sleep. As we transition to an intimate and, in some ways, also ghastly experience of popular culture and of a real life, which is embodied in Heidi's latest collection. And there it is, An Insomniac's Slumber Party with Marilyn Monroe. I wanted to just share a little bit of background with you. I first met Heidi at the Gathering for Poets on the Coast, which is an annual writing retreat for women hosted by Susan Rich and Kelly Russell Agadan, which has been going on for over 10 years. In the first year that I met Heidi in workshop, I was so absolutely struck by the keenest eye she had for the quirkiest line and the most intimate image. She just went right for it and allowed us to see it and understand it and share with us its significance, so that what the poet could continue to amplify that area of the poem. She knew where to take you within your own poem. In her own work, I recognized in those early years, when I was lucky enough to be in her group, how she certainly knew how to turn a phrase and give voice to the suppressed voice, particularly the voices of women. I had such a gravitational pull to her work and her energy. I came to understand that her own journey with poetry was likely the roadmap for that discovery. Always and often in seclusion with poetry until she kind of broke open and broke through to be now one of our most necessary editors and enduring voices. All you have to know is the work of the past, just the work within the past 4 years. 3 chapbooks, Finding My Way Home from Finishing Line Press in 2018, Bite Marks, winner of the 2020 Comstock Review Chapbook Prize, published in April 2021, and Once a Diva from Dancing Girl Press, also in 2021. If you've had the opportunity to read, as I have a number of times, her first full-length poetry collection, Give a Girl Chaos, See What She Can Do. I've not only been able to read it, I've been able to hear her read from it a number of times. I love her reading style. Published in March 2019 by CNR Press, it seems to me that Give a Girl Chaos is the perfect overture for her latest, which we're going to hear from tonight. I am absolutely inundated and haunted every time I get to hear her read from An Insomniac's Slumber Party with Marilyn Monroe, which won the 2020 Pank Books Poetry Prize and was published in June 2021. Again, a testament to her prolificness. It is the rare poet who can take an iconic diva and make her story more interesting, more intriguing, and further illuminate what we think we know happens in the dark when we can't sleep. She makes Marilyn new and raw footage. Heidi is that rare poet, adept at her craft and introducing us with conviction to the next generation of poets that we must read across all our differences, as the executive editor of the Adroit Journal. So again, I'm so privileged and honored to be able to introduce another important poetry citizen to all of us, and get ready for a sleepless night. Thanks, Heidi.
Oh my. Oh my. Thank you. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Lynn and Carolyn and Susanna, for this extraordinary platform for poets and poetry. And I'm very grateful for everyone in this community. What a turnout, and what a way to start 2022, which promises to be a better year. And I am honored to have followed the very powerful words of Ravi and Andrea and Dawn. Yeah, it's kind of, we're going to make a real shift. And so thank you for coming along on this ride. An Insomniac Slumber Party with Marilyn Monroe is really a conversation, kind of a middle of the night slumber party. So let's all pretend we're at a slumber party. It's the middle of the night, and you get to that place where you're telling each other secrets, you're telling each other your stories. You sort of, you get to this blurred space where maybe you've had a little bit of wine and you're up all night. So that is the premise for this book. And I'm going to just start with the very first poem in it and read a little bit. It's called Insomnia Diary, and it's actually a poem that is scattered throughout. So there's these sort of time-stamped moments. This is the first one. 1:28 a.m. I've taken Ambien every day this week. On Tuesday, a quarter tab. By Thursday, a half. My pillow bucks. Crows peck the skylight and the moon's a neon fog. My love breathes through his mouth, flaming a fire. I close my eyes in the smoke, but sparks remain. Marilyn. She arrives, a gardenia in a cellophane box, petals of honeyed hair radiating. Each blade of light travels the bud of her dimpled chin, how like a child holding a buttercup to know the future. It's all there in the corsage of her lips, teeth like snowdrops emerging after the last frost. Her cheeks a landscape of peonies not yet weighted by the heaviness of their heads. The internet loves her, and I love how lashes brush the sky of her face like a bow sprung, and her eyes blooming only now. I see her everywhere. On the wall of a cowboy bar in Wyoming, a photo of Marilyn in a potato sack, naked, legs like a chorus girl, Idaho spanning her breasts, potatoes cinching her waist, 100 pounds net marking her pubis, marking her as a bag of produce to be slit open, dumped into a bin, priced and purchased. To be someone's mash, soup, fries, rolled in tin and baked until she steams when sliced with a knife from end to end, butter seeping. The photo marked 1951, courtesy Fox Studios Department of Publicity. Reticular activating factor, says my mother. She's on your brain. I let her stay in my head for a while. I prop Warhol's Marilyn Monroe 1967 postcard on my desk. We stare at one another, her eyelids smeared with raspberry, her mouth a smashed plum. So these poems go back and forth in either the speaker's voice, which is some version of the poet, or in Marilyn's voice, which is some version of Marilyn, because of course, Marilyn was also a performative character. And sometimes it's hard to tell, as it is in the middle of the night and as it is when we are close to someone who's speaking. But this one is in Marilyn's voice. What I give of myself. It used to bother me when people I didn't know touched me. They haven't loved me. No, not really. They say, Marilyn, touch me, as if we are friends, lovers, as if we hadn't seen each other in forever. And now the whiff of me, the scent of me, they feel belongs to them. Just don't let them see me sweat. The flush rushing at my throat as they push into my body, a body that is not my body. These days, I don't even recognize myself. A photograph, black and white, a flash. So I do what I always do, what I have to, the press of a wallet, the pressure. I turn and smile, blow a kiss that is really nothing, a transaction of air. Refusing to bow. Marilyn's been so accommodating, smiling in her winning, winsome way for decades now. And now on Instagram and Twitter, oh, the things said about Marilyn. Really, friends even, take Capote. He knew to steer her by the elbow into a bar, to slowly slip her secrets down his throat, then parade her like a poodle leashing down Lexington. Or Miller, oh Arthur, you should have buried her off stage. Poor thing, the tourists mutter, posing by her crypt. She is a selfie. Such are the physics of living larger than life. Even Pauline Kael wrote, I wish they'd let her die. But here she is still, jiggling and giggling on YouTube, refusing to bow to the bitch that is gravity, that is the grave. Snapping a selfie. I would like to say something to the woman I've known since I was that red-haired girl. I only borrowed the smile for the day. I know it's a little worn, torn at the seams. You see, I hardly know what to do with myself, but lipstick helps. Paint my mouth like a bed of zinnias, orange, hot pink, fire red, and pretend I'm summer. I'll invite everyone I know over and we'll jump in the pool, splash around in the blue of my eyes. In a blink, we're all smoking cigarettes behind the vending machine and dropping dimes for soda pops. I have a sinking feeling that this moment is already gone where the extinct animals go to get cataloged, a flash in the pan, like the aero car or the hydrogen bomb or gold nail polish. All that glimmers is what keeps me up at night. But last night was a blur. Isn't it always that way when you wake up and look in the mirror at who you were yesterday? Some days it's best to stay in bed way past when the robins have gone. This poem is called Blonde as a Color. Should I describe her in color? Honey, champagne, the fading lemon wedge of a horizon before it melts into midnight blue or milk gone sour. Mailer called her a sweet, bursting peach, having never met her. His fantasy that he could save her from other men like him. Practicing lines offset, she knew hot pink hunger, coiling in her stomach, burning her throat. That's how Warhol painted her. Violent, bursting, pomegranate staining the ivory shag carpet. What color will I choose? Tulip red, indigo blue, like a Japanese robe or the lupin in my garden? Or is she black like a spider suspended, holding steady against the breeze? Perhaps she is happiest there, out of view, watching you. And I'll read one more. I'm gonna skip to the back. And I'll read. So a lot of these poems started out in form, and then I unraveled the form to sort of fit the scenario of both being an insomniac and also of how Marilyn's life unraveled. But this poem is called All I Ever Wanted, and it was originally an abecedarian, and it was in a nice, tight little box, meant to look like an obit. And when I printed it out, this book was my thesis, my MFA. And when I printed it out to give to one of my advisors along the way, he was like, "Oh, this is fabulous. You did this abecedarian and it's like zigzags." And I went, "Oh, wait, no, it's not supposed to look like that." And then I decided, yes, like that was what Marilyn wanted, that she would be so clever, that she would actually be able to take the abecedarian and make it do this perfect sort of motion across the page. So all I ever wanted: an ermine-lined raincoat and a pocketbook of barbiturates taken by the handful, washed down with champagne, fridge stocked with good bubbly. I love doctors too. A doctor a day makes the sad go away. Everything. I want everything to be swell for my friends. My friends keep me alive, they honestly do. God gave me a childhood from hell and no father, but heaven help me. I have real talent and work I so love. I will never give it up, not for any Joe. not even my Joe, my hero, my savior, nor for the Kennedy I've kissed or two. I suppose real love is rare. I fall in love, but there's not one man that I have truly loved. Men love me, or they love Marilyn Monroe, that is, naked as a jay. I don't mind naked, it's just skin. Open me up. You'll find a woman inside who reads poetry, loves it, and jazz and art. And oh gosh, Arthur, he questioned my intelligence. Before I even met him, I'd read his plays and all the great books. And at UCLA, I studied history. I'm a student of life. Holy moly. If only things had been different. Mama's brain healthy and life's ugly stuff like prep men and contracts, sexism, addiction, and violence gone. But would there be a Marilyn Monroe? Would she exist if Norma Jean hadn't become the X-rated beauty queen, sexual dream doll? And would you be here reading my thoughts decades after a man zipped a bag over my thighs, breasts, baby blue eyes? Thank you. What an honor.
Stunning.
Wow, thank you so much. That was really beautiful. It was really a beautiful night. I appreciate so much our generous readers. I was just very struck also by the introductions, and it was nice to not be introducing someone tonight so I could really focus on listening. You know, Sandy Yanone and Don Krieger saying that poetry seeking justice where justice has not been served. And she talked about the biting undercurrent and temperate gentleness of his poetry, which really was true. Carolyn Wright on Ravi Shankar, and she said his poetic diction inhabits both worlds, Tamil and English, East and West, expansive and relaxed, Whitman-esque poetry. It was just, and that came true. And then Susanna Case on Andrea Carter Brown with that central question, you know, that her work makes us ask, how do we survive in uncertain times? And her work kind of answered without answering, because we all have our own answer, but it kind of answered that question. And then Sandy again on Heidi Seaborn, the keenest eye for the most intimate image, get ready for a sleepless night. And exactly, you know, delivered, and Heidi delivered that exactly what she said. It was just the keen eye and the intimate image. It was very intimate. So thank you to my co-hosts and to our wonderful readers, Don Krieger, Ravi Shankar, Andrea Carter Brown, and Heidi Seaborn. Thank you so much for reading for the West East Poets of the Pandemic and Beyond series. Our next reading is Sunday, March 13. Please friend us individually if you want on Facebook, so you'll see the posts, you know, when they come up. We have an event page also on Facebook. And that's it. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you so much. So you can all unmute yourselves, and you know, as people are signing off, I'll just stay, and you know, if people want to talk to each other, I know a lot of you know each other, and
Yeah.
yeah, I'm going to stop the recording now.
What is the name of your reading series?
Poets of the Pandemic and Beyond. WE stands for West East Coast.
I see.
Okay, I think I stopped. Well, it didn't stop.